Is your AP Government video on interest groups. So an interest group is just a group of people who associate with one another and they share a common interest, and that's typically to influence government policy or to get certain laws changed. It differs from a political party. The political party's goal is to try to elect people to the legislative branch or the presidency, whereas the interest group is about a specific interest. Parties generally represent a wide variety of various topics. Sometimes interest groups are referred to as special interest. That name usually has a negative connotation when you're trying to say a candidate that you don't like took money from special interest. It's typically means that they are taking money from people that you would think are not appropriate. In the Federalist 10, James Madison referred to factions, and he would have used that term factions for both interest groups and political parties. Remember, at the time, we do not have very organized political parties and interest groups the way we do today. So they just had various factions of people who had, some common interests. We have many, many interest groups in our country, and part of that is because the American people have a lot of varied interests in different topics that they care about. This is very pluralist in nature. Pluralism is the idea that people have to come together in a whole bunch of different small groups, have to coalesce into one larger group in order to reach a majority. So this is very democratic. If you've got 3 or 4 different topics of interest or political topics that you care about, you can join an interest group, and then that interest group can represent you on that interest. A political party has a set policy on a whole bunch of topics, which you might not agree with 100% of. So interest groups help you to kind of target more specifically the areas in which you care about certain things. Sometimes interest groups become really large and then they become movements, social movements. This is a large body of people who start to do action as opposed to just donating money or sending emails. Something like the civil rights movement or the temperance movement are examples. Now, there's various types of interest groups. We're going to talk about some varied ones. Business interest groups are the largest and most represented type of interest groups we have in the country. And this is well more than 50% of all the interest groups. Now, corporations are also interest groups. Corporations want specific policies to be passed by our government. They have an incentive to try to get certain policies that would affect them or their employees passed. So they form interest groups and get involved in the political process. Same thing with labor unions, professional associations. I put 2 examples here, the American Medical Association and American Bar Association. They represent doctors and lawyers who, of course, in the profession have certain policies that they would like to enact on behalf of people that are in their association. There's lots of single issue groups. The National Rifle Association is the second largest interest group in the country, and they fight on behalf of weapons rights. Right to life is another example of a single issue. So if this is one particular topic that you really care about, then you might also want to be a part of this particular group in addition to some political party. There are some that have kind of broader issue. The Sierra Club is the largest environmental rights group, so they are fighting climate change. Human Rights Campaign is the largest gay rights and marriage equality group in the country. And the largest and most powerful interest group in the country is AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons. They represent older people. You do have to be 55 in order to be a member of AARP. There's a lot of people who are involved with AARP, and they, of course, try to advance things that older Americans care about, like medical issues, healthcare, Medicare, and Social Security. There's also some protest groups. The NAACP historically has been very involved in doing serious and organized protests. A lot of times the NAACP uses the legal system in order to try to get things up to the Supreme Court so the laws can get overturned or changed. NOW is the National Organization for Women, a very powerful women's rights groups. And you may have heard of PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. This is an animal rights group. All nonprofit charities are also interest groups. A nonprofit charity is what we refer to as a 501c3, which is the tax designation. It has to be both nonprofit and charitable. There are lots of things that are nonprofit but not charities. So schools would be an example of that. There are also 501c4s, which are nonprofit political organizations. There are also ideological groups. All of your think tanks are in here. The Brookings Institute, the Cato Institute, and the Heritage Foundation are 3 think tanks. All 3 of those have a very specific ideological lean, and they typically do research on how to come up with new and interesting solutions to problems. The ACLU is the American Civil Liberties Union, and they represent all of our civil liberties and fight for our rights in courts. So they are a bunch of lawyers who take people to court if you're violating the rights that we have been given in the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And then there are also governmental groups, which are represented as interest groups. Because federal, state, and local government in our system of federalism all sometimes work together and sometimes against each other, a lot of times the governors, the National Governors Association, all of the governors of the states band together, and then they can lobby the federal government together. There are leagues of cities and towns, and here locally we have the Maricopa Association of Governments. MAG represents all of the cities within Maricopa County. We have had exponential growth in the number of interest groups in our country, and there's lots of reasons for this. As we start to weaken political parties, first with the progressive era and then with campaign finance reform, starting with FICA in the 70s, political parties start to lose their power in fundraising money and choosing candidates. So one way to find a different way to get your money into the political system is to donate a bunch of money to an interest group or the interest group's PAC, the Political Action Committee. We've also had a lot of economic development and technology. So technology makes it a lot easier for people to start a PAC and to fundraise money. But remember, every time a new industry is created because a product is invented or the internet is invented, you've got a whole series of companies, you have a whole series of employees. All of them want to be represented by interest groups and PACs. And then every time a government passes a policy, there's people who dislike it. So people can create interest groups in opposition to other interest groups. And of course, as a very diverse population of people, this happens pretty frequently. But all of this is happening today on a large scale. The social media popularity of a number of different sites makes it very easy for us to expand the number of interest groups and PACs and people donating.